everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to today's webinar, Strategies to Beat Burnout. I'm Danielle Romano, Managing Editor of Convenience Store News, and I'll be your moderator for today's program. We'll get started in just a few moments, but first, I have some quick housekeeping announcements before we begin. The materials in this webinar have been reviewed by our editorial staff. However, the views of the speaker and their organization are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of Convenience Store News or our publisher, Ensemble IQ. Next, I want to let you know that one of our goals is to make this session as interactive as possible. So you can use the Q&A function on the left side of your screen below the presenter headshot to ask questions or submit comments throughout the program. I'll pose any questions on your behalf. Your identity will remain confidential to the audience. If we don't have time to answer all the questions, we'll follow up with you after the program concludes via email. You can also use this Q&A function if you have any technical questions about the webinar itself, and you'll get a direct reply from our webinar producer. Some final housekeeping announcements. At the end of the event, we'll have an evaluation survey. We encourage you to provide feedback using this feature. If you wish to review this webinar or share it with your colleagues, a replay will be available within 2 hours from any platforms. And lastly, the presenter slides are also available for download. You can find them under the Event Resources tab. And now on to today's presentation. Convenience Store News' Future Leaders in Convenience program, which is now in its 8th year, is designed to celebrate and help develop the next generation of C-store industry leaders by providing a forum for talented young business people to hone their leadership skills while recognizing the achievements of a select few rising stars already making significant contributions to the industry. Last year, we added another element to our program, the Future Leaders Learning Lab. Skills-based and delivered in quick-hitting 30-minute segments, this quarterly webinar series aims to give participants techniques and tools they can use to take their careers to the next level. Today's Learning Lab session focuses on safeguarding yourself from professional burnout, a silent threat that erodes confidence, damages relationships, and diminishes our health. I'm happy to have with us today Courtney Murphy. As a career and leadership coach, HR consultant, and best-selling author of Life After Burnout, Reclaim, Recover, Renew, she has helped countless professionals not just recover from burnout, but thrive in success. She'll walk us through how to identify early warning signs and understand the stages of burnout, and provide some practical strategies to help manage stress and cultivate lasting resilience in our professional lives. Courtney, I'm really excited to have you here.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Danielle, and welcome everyone to our session today. As mentioned, we are going to talk about strategies to thrive in success. And to first do that, we have to understand what burnout is. And if you're a little burnt out on the term burnout, like some of us are, think of it as chronic occupational stress. That seems to be a little more palatable these days. We all suffer from some degree of occupational stress. And once we can identify where it gets extreme and unhealthy, we can make early interventions and take strides towards thriving in our success. So that's what we're going to talk about today. First, if you are succumbing to chronic occupational stress or burnout, I want you to know you are not alone. About 70 to 80% of professionals are experiencing some signs of burnout. And that has been consistent for the past several years. And unfortunately, we're not seeing it get better anytime soon. It will be an important skill set to manage this occupational stress, both for your physical and mental health, but also for your financial and relationship health. And as we get into the signs and symptoms, you'll understand that a little bit more importantly. So we're going to talk about how do you safeguard your most important assets against the effects of burnout and chronic stress. You can see here I have a QR code for a job stress assessment. So you can pull that up on your phones right now if you wish, and then set it aside. And I want you to really take some independent time to focus on that later. You also will have access to a copy of this slide deck. So just know that this is here and you can go through it, and it will help you understand what we talked about today and how it specifically applies to your own personal situation. So first of all, what is burnout? There's a lot of information in the social sphere about burnout. And while a lot of it is well-intentioned, there are actual facts that revolve around burnout that are not necessarily what we hear in social media. The World Health Organization identified and defined burnout in 2019. And it has 3 key characteristics. First, a feeling of exhaustion. Second, cynicism. And third, a loss of professional efficacy. Or if you want to think of that as maybe a loss in confidence in your ability to do your job well. So those 3 characteristics are what trigger this definition of burnout. But I want to clarify that it is not a diagnosis. It is not a mental health condition. It is a workplace phenomenon. So really important to recognize that it isn't a problem to be cured, but it is a situation that arises that we can affect once we know the proper tools to do so. Now, that definition came about in 2019, but it has actually been studied for decades. And back in the 1970s, a scientist discovered 12 stages of burnout. So to get into these, to help you identify if you're experiencing burnout, the first 6 I like to refer to as the stealth stages of burnout. And that is really because we don't recognize that it's happening when we're in this phase. So thinking back on that definition, that loss of professional efficacy or loss in confidence of our ability to do our job well, it creates this compulsion to prove our worth and to prove our value. And we want to prove it to maybe our subordinates, our bosses, our peers, but it's also important to recognize that we're trying to prove it to ourselves, that we are still good at what we do. Now, to do that, we tend to double down on our work. We start becoming territorial, we hoard work, and we work harder. And when we get into the causes of burnout, you'll see where this working harder can really amplify the problem. We go from that stage to neglecting our personal needs. We might get feedback at this point that maybe some of our decisions in neglecting those needs and amplifying our efforts towards our work are causing some problems, especially if you are bringing some of that home. Your most trusted people will be giving you feedback that there's a problem. And then we start displacing that conflict. We reason it out. We say there's a light at the end of the tunnel. This is temporary. It'll be worth it. Then we shift from that into a revision of values. So we start making more personal sacrifices, and our personal needs become dismissed. And at this point, we are in full-on denial. I hope truly that none of you can relate to this right now, but I will tell you, I have been through this, and I went through every single one of those 6 stages and did not recognize there was a problem at any of those stages. That's why it's so great to hear what they are now, because hopefully if we can recognize it sooner, we can prevent ourselves from getting into the next 6 stages of burnout, which I call the severe stages. So then we get into a phase of withdrawal where maybe we are not trying to engage with people, especially in the work environment, but maybe this carries over into our personal lives as well. We then have observable behavior changes. We become more irritable, maybe more cynical. After that, because our behavior is changing, we start to not recognize ourselves. With that irritability, we may have a lower tolerance. We may snap at somebody, and we hear ourselves and we think, that is not me. Who is this person talking? I don't do things like that. So then we start experiencing depersonalization. You might not identify with who you are acting like in the moment. And that can feel really lonely and scary. We get into a feeling of emptiness, feelings of depression, and the final stage is a full mental and physical breakdown. Now, Not everyone experiencing burnout goes through all 12 of these stages, thank goodness. And not everyone experiencing burnout goes through these stages specifically in that order. But these are important trends to recognize and tools to help us make positive improvement. So before we get into what that improvement is, I want to talk briefly about the symptoms of burnout because they can be vast. Not everyone has the same experience, but there typically are strong physical, mental, and emotional and behavioral symptoms that come about with chronic stress. Specifically with burnout, we notice that exhaustion is at the top of the list for all three of these. But what I want you to recognize is that some of these physical symptoms can have short-term impact as well as long-term impact. The mental symptoms can affect your ability to do your job well, and the emotional and behavioral symptoms can affect your ability to show up in your relationships in a positive way. So this is where we get into the importance of safeguarding your entire lifestyle by taking this seriously and taking steps in a positive way. So the good news is I want you to think of burnout as a spectrum. At the bottom of a spectrum, the vitality spectrum, which goes from burnout all the way up to thriving. And 35 years of research out of Stanford has found that there are 6 key factors that contribute to where we fall on this spectrum. We may move up and down based on the day, based on the moment, but we generally have kind of a zone that we hover in. And once we know what those 6 key factors are that determine where we're falling on that spectrum, we can use them to our advantage to shift ourselves up closer to thriving. These 6 factors I noticed fit into a very convenient acronym, which I like to call the Thrive factors. So first we have treatment, or more specifically, you can think of your perception of fairness. Next is healthy workload, recognition and rewards, individuals and your interactions with those individuals, which may be thought of as like your sense of community. Then we have values alignment, and finally, empowerment, which you can also think of as your sense of control. So when you start to feel triggered or you start to feel your stress levels amping up a little bit, you can revisit these Thrive factors and identify which specific factor or multiple factors are being triggered. And then you can take strategic efforts to make positive improvement in that specific area. So today we're going to talk about the most common triggers and the most common areas that come up with all of my clients experiencing burnout. The first is overwhelming workload. And the positive impact we can make there is to perform strategic workload management. And I have another acronym for you here. If anyone grew up in the 80s or 90s, maybe your teachers had a little chart on the side of the blackboard. They had everyone's name on it, and you'd have these tiny little gold stars that they would use to stick next to everyone's name based on whatever performance indicator they were tracking in the moment. Maybe it was a reading chart or a behavior chart, who knows, right? And these little gold stars, while maybe sometimes a little traumatizing, they were also pretty motivating, and they represented our efforts or our work. And so for workload management, we're gonna remember those tiny little gold stars that were on that chart in our elementary classroom, because our acronym here is STAR. So first, we can share our work. And I want you to have this mental switch go off in your head that when you're sharing your work, you are sharing opportunities for growth and development. This is important because when you get into burnout, if you recall those first 2 stages, we can become territorial. And we're adding to our workload instead of managing it. So some methods for sharing our work, that might be delegation. It might be cross-training. It might be initiating a team project versus an individual project. It might be simply just offloading a project that you have to someone that's maybe more junior and looking for an opportunity to stretch their skill sets or demonstrate their value. So remember that you can share your work in certain circumstances. The next method is task management. So this might be automation. It could be using AI nowadays. We're doing a lot of task management that way. It could also be effective prioritization. Next, we have attention management. So the biggest thing that we want to be aware of with attention management is what is causing our brain to shift away from the work in front of us. And there are typically two main categories. Number one is a distraction that is pulling your attention, like if you have a phone that's sitting on the corner of your desk. Are your notifications on? Do you have time limits set on whatever apps you love to spend time in? Should you put it in a drawer? Is it that your email dings every time you get something new coming in on your computer, and do you need to silence those notifications? Is time blocking so that you can silence everything else out going to help you focus your attention? So think about silencing all those distractions. The other thing with attention management that could be happening is our brains are not built to be focused on work 8, 9, 10 hours a day. And so we truly need brain breaks to recharge periodically throughout the day. So if you're having trouble focusing your attention, I want you to think about recharging your brain. If you think about your brain as a battery or like your phone, you have to plug it in every now and then. As your battery starts dipping, go plug it in. So when that's happening, picking up your phone and spending a few minutes on social media might feel comforting in the moment. You might get that dopamine hit, but it's not actually recharging the battery of your brain. Maybe get up, go for a walk. Maybe go connect with another human. Maybe go get a snack or a drink of water. If you can go outside, that will be really more beneficial and more recharging, so that when you re-engage into your work, you can actually have a better chance of focusing again. And finally, for R, we have reduce. Now, you can responsibly say no to additional work if you ask the appropriate questions first to see that it really is the right decision. That might be, when is this project due? What level of quality does it have to be done? Is a rough draft acceptable? If you're anything like me and people that tend to burn out, you might be a perfectionist. And perfectionists will always take on extra work, and they'll do it to the best quality possible. And this adds to burnout because sometimes that's not what's necessary. Sometimes the rough draft is all that we need. And if you get that information first, then you can really make a healthy decision of saying, yeah, I can take on that extra work and I can get it done by that deadline with that level of quality. Or you can say, you know what, I'm sorry, I can't meet that deadline without my other work suffering. We're going to have to reprioritize here. So instead of taking on all of the work that's presented, get the information first and then make a healthy decision about it. Some other ways to reduce workload are, of course, to delegate, maybe hire a new team member, and so forth. And I want you to be aware, again, with charging your brain battery, that reducing your overall work starts with reducing the mental load during your personal time. Can you cut that tether so that you're not constantly engaged in work around the clock? Because then when you do re-engage, you will be more efficient and more effective. So these are tools for strategic workload management. Next, I want to get into habits and boundaries, because these are really helpful in burnout. So if you think back to the Thrive factors and something that may have been triggering to you, take your specific example and see if it's something that you can control, something you can influence, or something that you can accept or not accept. And once you identify that, you can put it into this little Venn diagram here. And for the things that you can control, you might build a habit around that. For things you can influence, you might look at advocating or setting a boundary around that. And things that you can accept or not, you have to consider your expectations. This little tool helps us identify, I'll give you an example. If I need to not work all night long, I would have a really hard time like shutting down work at the end of the day and going home. So I would say, okay, my habit will be, I'm going to leave every day at 6 o'clock. I'm going to set myself an alarm. And when that alarm goes off, I will shut it down and I will go. Alternatively, if it's something that I can influence, which would be like expectations of others to be able to get a hold of me after hours, I would do an advocacy and a boundary. So first I would tell them, if you contact me after hours, I won't read the email until the next morning. That's my boundary. However, if it's urgent, please call or text and I will address it. That's my advocating. So that's kind of the difference. The habit is something that I can control myself when I shut it down. The influence is how other people get a hold of me. So you can practice that on your own, and I encourage you to take 20 minutes of your day tomorrow or this afternoon to plan this out for one thing that's triggering you right now. Next, we're going to talk about stress resilience. There are 3 key things that the human body needs: nourishment, movement, and rest and reset. Of course, we all know about general nutrition, but I want to point out here that alcohol, caffeine, and sugar diminish our body and our brain, our nervous system's ability to function at peak performance. So if you're experiencing chronic stress right now, these are things that you might want to consider reducing. For movement, what I want to point out here is that, of course, we all know about working out, but you can also just move your body in whatever way is effective and comfortable for you. A rigorous workout routine is not going to work for everybody, but maybe going for a walk every day is. Maybe a nighttime stretch is your thing. Move your body in whatever way is reasonable for you, though. And finally, rest and reset. We know that sleep is critically important. And beyond that, I want to talk about meditative activities. So meditation itself is a wonderful tool, but not everyone finds it easy to do. So if you fall into that category, just remind yourself that there are activities that can calm our brain in a similar way. This might be journaling, having a gratitude practice, or calming hobbies that we do on a regular basis. So for stress resilience, I want to point out here our little logo there. There's a shield. I want you to think of stress resilience as your shield to help prevent stress getting to you in the first place. And one thing you can do in this area is to consider your nourishment, your movement, your rest or reset, and build a tiny little habit around that. Pick one thing you want to improve and make it the tiniest little habit. For example, if I want to walk every day, I might say, I'm going to walk to the end of the block rather than walk a mile. And I do that because consistency is more important than perfection. So I will walk to the end of the block and I know I can't fail at that. If I decide at the end of the block to go further, then I can do that. And I probably will do that many days. But at least I built this habit so small that I can build consistency on it. And I can then level up once I get better and better at that consistency. I want to point out here that you can monitor your stress resilience. So as you build these habits and you focus on building stress resilience, if you have an Apple Watch, an Oura Ring, maybe a Fitbit, check your app for heart rate variability and also your sleep trends if you wear it at night. These will give you some good data on whether you're making improvements or adjustments in your overall stress resilience. And then, of course, self-awareness or feedback from an accountability partner, someone that lives in your household, that can also give you some general idea of whether you're making your strides in this area. And finally, I want to talk about stress management. This is more when you're in the moment and you're triggered and your nervous system is firing and you're into fight or flight or freeze. these are the things that you can do to try to reset that nervous system response. It's coping. So I have a little acronym here too called DISC, and our little logo is a refresh symbol with a disc. So the strategy is distract. This would be a mental distraction, like saying the ABCs backwards or singing a song from your childhood or noticing what your senses are picking up on. You can also interrupt. So this is what a cold plunge does, or movement, especially hard cardio movement, or even laughter. And then finally, self-control. You can try deep breathing, grounding, or co-regulation, which is a fun one that I love in the psychology world. Think of it as how we jump a car. You can jump your nervous system with a trusted person in your life. And there's even some data that maybe pets can help this too. So you have another being with a calm, not triggered nervous system, and you engage with them and see if your nervous system can help get aligned into their calm levels to calm your own. So that's a little hack that we have. And I just want to do a quick review before we end today that we talked about the Thrive factors. You can look at workload management tools. You can set habits and boundaries. You can work on stress resilience, and then you can manage your stress in the moment when you are triggered. So I am Courtney Murphy. I work with individuals and companies to help professionals and companies thrive in their success. There's a QR code here for my contact information. If you want to learn more about this, you can reach out to me, or you can check out my book, Life After Burnout, with the other QR code on the right here. And I really want to thank you for the time today, and I really hope you can take at least one small thing away from our session and work to build enhancements on your ability to thrive in your success. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Courtney. That was amazing. I think we've all experienced some areas of burnout, and I really liked your STAR acronym and how it takes us back to, that STAR chart, when we were kids. And it's a good reminder for us to take those brain breaks and just reinvigorate. So I really love that. It looks like we have time for maybe one or two questions. So as a reminder, you can submit your questions using the Q&A function on the left side of your screen. And if we do run out of time before getting to your question, we'll get back to you privately via email. So Courtney, some good questions that came in. This one is, how can I talk to my boss about burnout without seeming weak?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for sharing that, Danielle, and thank you for the audience member who brought that up. I think the most important aspect here is to schedule specific time with your supervisor rather than bombarding them out of the blue. Get a meeting in the books, sit down and say, here are some things that I'm concerned about right now that I'm experiencing, and show up to that meeting then with possible solutions. A lot of supervisors don't really know what to do in that scenario. I've seen supervisors say, okay, we'll take a day off of work. And, as we went through the content here, a day off of work is really temporary and it doesn't fix burnout. So if you can use the Thrive factors to assess what is triggering and you can come up with a possible solution around that, then you can ask for support. You can ask for approval, you can ask for resources, but then you're not just showing up seeming like you're complaining or that you're broken. You're showing up with solutions. And I promise you, if you are feeling it, someone else may be triggered by the same thing, and your solution may have a greater impact than just you.
Great, that's awesome. That's good to lean into another question that had come in. So it was, how can leaders identify burnout in their teams?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. So if you think back to the different stages of burnout, as well as the symptoms, Depending on how long you've worked with an individual and how close you are with your teams, you will start to notice these changes. You might notice their health changing. You might notice an increased use of sick time. You might notice brain fog where they're not as sharp as they used to be. You might notice irritability or incivility even in work interactions. And so if those things start coming up, those should be immediate triggers to you that there's something bigger going on. And kind of the reverse of what I was talking about with the first question is you can, again, use these thrive factors in assessing other people and coming up with solutions and identifying what's triggering for them. So I think having a really positive conversation with any individual that you're noticing these behaviors in to identify what's triggering and to come up with a plan will be more effective than, just saying, hey, stop being rude to your coworker.
It's like reprimanding a toddler.
Yes, that's right.
Got it. All right. Well, it looks like we are out of time for questions. So I want to thank everybody who did submit, and for any questions we did not get to, again, Courtney will get back to you privately. We really appreciate you attending today's webinar, and please remember to fill out the evaluation survey because we really appreciate the feedback. Courtney, thank you again for sharing your insight with us. This was a really great topic and I think super relevant. Thank you to the audience for our time, and I encourage you to visit the events and webcast section of our website, csnews.com, to take a look at some of our past Learning Lab webinar sessions. So thanks everybody. Have a great day.